Hello, I'm Gus Downing, publisher and editor of the D&D Daily, and this is the LP News Network. With us today is Kathleen Smith, CFI, VP of Asset Protection, Albertsons-Safeway, and Anne Marie Schubert, District Attorney, Sacramento County. Their session being given at the Internet Protect Conference here in Dallas is entitled Inside the Battle: How Reducing Theft Penalties Impacts Community Safety. As more states are considering alternative measures to combat prison overcrowding, the negative consequences of California's Prop 47 have been unmistakable for retailers. Nearly all are experiencing a rise in shoplifting, some by as much as 15%. With more states evaluating similar measures, what's a company's defense? Their session's objective today is to provide strategies to counteract legal challenges, know the power of data sharing and data analytics, to develop prosecutable cases, and establish grassroots effort to sway support when these initiatives are proposed in your state. Kathleen, Anne Marie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You know, Kathleen, what's your perspective of how California's Proposition 47 and the felony thresholds raising across the U.S., how has that impacted employee safety from a national retailer perspective?
What we've seen as a company, Gus, overall, is that it's not the same shoplifter we dealt with 5-10 years ago. This shoplifter, that's a nice name for him, I guess, or her, is far more violent. There's far more violence. Our employees are facing assaults with weapons. Even our contract services that we use are being assaulted with guns and knives. It's just not safe. And it's as if it's fueled by something else, so it's not just the typical shoplifter. And as we've tried to lobby legislation to change this, we've had the union lobbying with us because it's their employees that are getting hurt as well. It's our employees that are getting hurt.
That's a rarity.
It is very, we're usually on opposite sides of
Right.
any type of a negotiation. So that's one of the key differences. And it's a frustration, it's a fear for the retailer themselves. We don't want our employees to actively engage with these individuals. And unfortunately, and we'll talk about this later, I think, is the bad guys have a great network amongst themselves. They talk far more than we as retailers talk, or we as retailers to prosecutors or to law enforcement. The bad guys talk together all the time, so they know that no one's going to stop. They're going to, if they just push their way out of a store, and that's what's happening.
So any idea of how much of the violence has increased over the last 5-10 years? I mean, any kind of measuring stick, any kind of word phrase you could use for it?
Well, it's tremendous. It's absolutely tremendous, and it's not just California.
Right.
So that happens. It's happening in all our states. Now, maybe some of the states, inner states within the country, are not as bad, but
Like Heartland.
yeah, Heartland. But Chicago,
Well,
Philadelphia, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., all of those, they're experiencing exactly the same thing. Our issue now is at the felony theft limit because it's only a misdemeanor.
well, and Anne Marie, what have your prosecutors seen in regards to changes in retail theft as a result of Prop 47?
Well, the challenges that we've seen from 47, and let me just talk policy-wise, the theory behind 47 was people that steal typically have drug problems, so let's get them treatment and help to get them out of the system.
And it's still the theory.
Well, it is the theory, and it's a good theory, but well, it is a true statement that that's often a common denominator.
Right.
However, the challenge we face is that we have essentially no consequences anymore for, I don't call them petty theft, I don't call them shoplifters, I call them serial thieves because that's what they are. And so for prosecutors, the challenge we have is that we've now reduced the threshold from, to basically it's got to be $950 to be a felony. And we cannot what we call aggregate that theft, meaning if I have an individual that decides to steal from 5 stores in 15 minutes and he steals $900 at each store, and now we've got $4,500, we cannot charge that as a felony. So as Kathy says, these thieves have become emboldened. We have anecdotal stories from our law enforcement partners that they go in with calculators and they calculate out. And then in California, the challenge, because it's a misdemeanor, is they now are given citations rather than taken to jail. And so they just essentially say, just give me my Prop 47 ticket. So even if they are cited, oftentimes they never show up for court. So we never see them as prosecutors. They just have what we call an FTA, a failure to appear, and you have thousands and thousands of warrants out there, and they just continue on with their thievery, all of which, for the most part, is designed to help them support their drug addiction. And so the challenge we face is that we don't have the tools anymore to encourage them to get into drug treatment court, which is a very, very successful program in California that helps get folks off of drugs. And so it's almost as if we've created more problems. We see many, if you just are on the streets of Sacramento, we have homelessness up 30% across California. It's sad, but it's also reality that many of those folks have drug problems and they have to figure out a way to support that problem.
Right, right.
When we sold, or when the public and the state public was sold Prop 47, it was to make our neighborhood safe, our schools safe. They were going to get funding for schools. So it's understandable how the public viewed that. It was reduce the prison overcrowding and provide funds for your schools. Great. So people voted for this proposition.
So from the savings in the budget from the prisons?
That was the theory. That was the promise made to voters, is that all these hundreds of millions of dollars that we're going to save from reducing the prison population is going to go to all these great things. But the reality is, in Sacramento County, we've not received a penny under Prop 47 funds. And even over the last 2 years, when they'll tell you they've saved $100 million, let's say it's $100 million. Well, there's 58 counties. Let's assume that was even divided equally. That's less than $2 million a county, which anybody that knows that when we talk about folks with serious core problems of drug addiction, and I do, again, I have empathy for them, but that's nowhere going to help the dent in the problem that we're facing now with the explosion of theft crimes, the increase in drug addiction. It's a terrible combination that we've seen.
And in letting the people out, of the nonviolent criminals out of jail, they didn't provide anything for them. So we know that the only way they can make a living is from stealing. And they are violent. It's desperate need, and we've seen the opioid epidemic increase tenfold. We've seen our fraud and our...
Part of which is blamed on the passage of marijuana being legalized around the country and the cartels having that revenue taken away from them. The increased distribution of fentanyl and opioids in order to replace that revenue. I mean, there is a school of thought there as well.
Are you asking if I agree?
No, it's just kind of a double.
I mean, they're two different drugs. Opioids for pain, and
Sure.
The marijuana is not for that. So, yeah,
it's still the drug war.
Right.
And it's a matter of cutting off one source of revenue and kind of funding another. It's merely a comment, that's all. A question for both of you, now that I understand the California Attorney General documented that larceny rates have soared more than 12% from 2014 to 2015, the year Prop 47 was enacted.
I will say this, though, is that I think those numbers are grossly underreported, because even though we see, across California property crimes going up, that's what's documented. And as I say, just because something is not reported to law enforcement does not mean it does not exist.
Right.
And so what we see just in the neighborhoods, and setting aside retail and grocers, people's cars are being broken into, their homes are being broken into, if you leave your car out on a street, someone's going to break into it. So many, many times those are not reported because people figure the cops aren't going to come, nothing's going to happen to them. So those numbers of 12 to 25% increase of property crimes, grossly underreported.
Well, and I have an example of a director of LP, loss prevention, that was in Union Square, that really had been visiting a store, saw a shoplifter,
Right.
thought it was a serial shoplifter, went to a police officer for an apprehension, and the police officer said, no, said, I don't have time to give them the citation.
Right.
And they're not going to do anything anyway. So,
Well, there's a lot of frustration
Yeah,
because
there would
there's,
be.
I mean, amongst all of us, because we want to help. That's our nature of why we're public servants. But when we don't have the tools anymore to help folks, that becomes a level of frustration that it's like, okay, so if I go through this process of either arresting him, booking him or her, taking him or her to jail, then they're out within, they're OR'd and they're out to do their business all over again. It becomes very frustrating to folks.
right. Can you give us an update on the Reducing Crime and Keeping California Safe Again Act, or SAFE, excuse me for adding again there, SAFE Act 2018, political slip or something.
Yeah, it is a political.
I mean, I understand it has over 500,000 signatures now.
Yes, it does.
It's in process. Can you give us an update and some advice for the retail viewers on what they can do to help, and I'll quote Keep California Safe website here, to reform theft laws to restore accountability for serial thieves and organized theft gangs? Some advice for retailers, how do they get involved, and a little update?
Well, it's critically important that retailers become involved in this initiative because this is what's affecting them significantly. I'm part of this initiative along with Assemblyman Jim Cooper, and it's really in response to what we've heard from the retailers and from other parts of the initiative as well. But the reality is, unless we partner together, we're not going to solve this problem.
And I would say we can't blame each other anymore. It's very easy to blame law enforcement. They won't come out and arrest them. It's very easy to blame the prosecutors.
Right.
It's very easy to blame the retailer for creating an environment that's conducive to stealing. We have to stop that and figure out a different way, a better way to do things, and we have to work together. We have to talk to our fellow retailers, and we have to support this initiative. It was very interesting to me to be a part of this Prop 47 political game that was played because a governor wanted to be known for a legacy of another bill, and it's wrong. And we had retailers that agreed to support a different initiative that backed out. And that's frustrating. So we as retailers have to buck up and do it together. We have to be able to share information. We'll look at different ways of doing things. We can't do it the same way. Shoplifters aren't doing it the same way. We can't do it. So we need to look at other ways to do it. And we need to forge relationships, and not just one time go meet them and off you go.
Right.
You really have to have a partnership.
And it's really important that folks become educated about what this initiative does, because people that don't want it would tell you, oh, we're just going to put more people in prison. Absolutely not true. There's not a single thing about this initiative that will send more people to prison. In fact, the theft piece of it, the serial theft piece, allows for a felony prosecution, but it has to be the third, and they don't go to prison. They go to county jail. And that's really designed, yes, it would be a felony potentially, but it's designed to give prosecutors and law enforcement the tools we need to say, Mr. Jones, you really need to go to drug treatment, and that's what we want you to do. But if you choose not to do that, then we're going to remove you from the community for a period of time so that you stop stealing.
Right.
So it's not overreaching, it's very balanced, it's very measured, and it's something that I think when people understand it and read it, they're going to understand why they should support it.
Now, when is it up for vote? Where is it now?
It's being counted right now by the local registrars, and it's either going to be on the 2018 or the 2020 ballot, but we're obviously very hopeful it's on the 2018 ballot.
Okay.
In
And when
November.
is that?
November.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And we really need the retailers to get involved now then and help support the effort and such.
Absolutely.
All the way, yes.
Right. And
Yeah.
legal counsel, in-house legal counsel would also help quite a bit, I would assume.
Yeah, and if it's as simple as doing things like get out to vote or mass email through your political action group in a state, any of those, we have to do something
Right,
and get the proper verbiage of what's happened and why we need to do this.
Right.
So,
Well, good luck with that.
thank you.
Counselor, what else can the retail LP investigators and executives do to help your team to make the shoplifting and ORC cases they file easier to prosecute?
Well, in California, we don't have an ORC statute, so this initiative will add that to that because we've heard it from the retailers that they really lack that in California. But for us as prosecutors, it's again what Kathy says, it's having a relationship so we can, educate folks. Here's what we need for an effective prosecution. Sometimes it has to do with just keeping us informed on who are the serial thieves, so that perhaps even in limited resource time, we can try to make sure that we put those people on our radar so that we can have an impact. We know that typically a small percentage of the population commits the most amount of crime. And so if we can target that smaller percentage, then we may have more success in basically sending a powerful message, don't bother doing business here.
Right. Kathleen, what's Albertsons doing to achieve that standard that DA Schubert just described of furnishing quality evidence and timely communication when needed?
Well, we're working with our divisions and encouraging them to participate, look for other resources, whether it be a service provider that's helping them, whether they dedicate a manager, whether they dedicate a specialist. They need to have somebody focused on that type of a relationship. We need law enforcement for many different issues within our, whether it be a road closed, a disaster. We really need to have a good relationship with law enforcement all over. So we're encouraging them to forge that relationship and keep it, whether it be through a third party, if that works, if they don't have the resources. How they do it is up to them.
And you mean the third party to manage the process?
The process.
After the apprehension?
Correct.
Such as the Alto Group or the Alto Alliance. Right.
That's one of the opportunities.
Right. So, Anne Marie, with over 30 states now having enacted ORC laws, we in the news just haven't seen a real uptake in the law's usage. I mean, it's still rarely used, and quite frankly, is that the retailers we don't think are communicating it enough with the DA offices around the country. Or is it, well, the DAs are probably not aware of it, they're not being informed, being a new law, they probably aren't aware of it. And then it appears that really there's no one that's pushing them or educating them about it. I mean, we've got a lot of laws in the books, but quite frankly, we're not seeing them used.
Well, we know in California, like I said, we don't have an ORC statute, so if we pass this initiative, we will. It doesn't mean that we don't have other ways we can do conspiracy to commit theft or whatever, but the challenge oftentimes is just the proof issues, and so that's where having some kind of dialogue, whether it be an educational training between prosecutors and retail, saying, listen, this is what we need to have to prove this crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And so that's where I think we can do much better at is, having that dialogue, whether it's through forums like NRF or whatever, so that we can understand and the retailers within that state can understand, here's what California law is, here's our limitations, here's what we need, here's the consequences. We may have other laws that we may say it's easier to prove this crime, so we're going to use this law instead of some type of conspiracy or something of that nature.
Right. My last question for both of you is, with this national trend of increasing felony thresholds, what advice do you have for the retailers? I mean, how do they build that defensive strategy, or how do they approach it, Kathleen?
I think they need to be involved legislatively earlier rather than later. We have a big organization, so we have people that look to laws that are being proposed in states. But every state or every couple of states have a retailers association, like NRF, in our case, like the food FMI, that are watching those, that can lobby for us. But we need to pay attention to it, support them, and then back them in what they're trying to propose. Earlier rather than later, I think. I guess we were probably, many of us were caught blindsided, yeah, on Prop 47, not ever anticipating the unintended consequences that we have. And we're not going to change it overnight. It's going to be a slow process, so be patient. But if we work together, I think we can.
Excellent. Any comments?
I just think it's critically important that, as she said, that people understand the policies that are trying to be implemented across the state in terms of these theft laws, and be prepared for ballot initiatives as opposed to legislative processes in a legislature, because in California, even the elected district attorneys were, I think, the overwhelming number of them were essentially blindsided by 47 making it to the ballot. And, you know, we're kind of the subject matter experts. And so be mindful of what's happening, because if you are blindsided, it's going to be very difficult to defend. In California, when we became aware of 47 being on the ballot, you know, DAs and cops are not the best at being political junkies. We're not necessarily good at raising money. But the fact is that, you know, we were outspent enormously because there's many groups out there that are trying to implement these laws. But the key to it is being vigilant, to understand what's happening, be ready for this trend, because it's here, it's already arrived in California, and if people are not prepared for it, it's going to result in millions and millions, if not more.
It's
loss.
all over the country.
It's all over the country.
It's all over the country.
Right.
And we are feeling it. I don't think we've peaked. I don't think we're close to feeling the end result.
Right.
I think it's a trend that's going to continue to spike, and it's going to continue to grow.
Right.
And it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I don't know that anyone has the answer to it. And I quite frankly don't know if the retail LP executives are going to really stay attuned that much to really get involved and really make something happen. I certainly hope so. And that's
Right.
the intention of some of these sessions that we're
Right.
doing, obviously.
Absolutely.
But I want to thank you both for being here today.
Thank you
very much.
Thanks for having us.
Well, that's it for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to thank you for watching. And until next time, let's keep them all safe out there.